Ketan. Ketan. Okay. The Bekor receives 2 shares of the father's property, but he does not receive 2 shares of the mother's property. Neither does he receive 2 shares of the improvement, nor what is fit to come as from what is already in his possession. Neither does a woman collect her ketubah from them, nor the daughters for their sustenance, nor the avim. None of them receive from the improvement, nor of what is fit to come as what has already been in his possession. These do not revert in the oval. The share of the Bakor, one who inherits his wife, one who performs yuvim with his brother's wife, and a gift. These are the words of Reb Meir. But if they come and say a gift is like a sale, if Eliezer says they all revert in Yovel. If Yochanan Broker says one who inherits his wife must return it to the members of the family, and he must deduct from the price they pay. The Misa of animals applies within the land of Israel and outside the land when the temple is in existence and when it is not in existence, and it is taken from ordinary animals but not from consecrated ones. It applies to both cattle and flocks, but one may not be taken as Misa for the other, and to sheep and goats, which may be taken as Misa for each other. To both new animals and old ones, and one may not be taken as Misa from the other. For it might have been argued that if the new animals and old animals, which are not kalayim with each other, may yet not serve as ma'isa for each other, then is it not logical that the sheep and goats, which are kalayim with each other, may surely not be taken as ma'isa for each other? The scripture states and flocks, implying that all types of flocks are considered as one.
Okay. Okay, ma'asa behema mitztarfkim lo regel behema ro'ah. Okay, so if a guy's got a bunch of flocks, how far apart can they be before they're counted towards you? Because you've got to have a minimum of 10 before you can start taking Ma'aseh Behema. Okay. Now, if he's got 5 over here and 5 over there, how far apart can they be in order to be counted as one group? And the answer that the Mishnah gives is Kamelo Regel, which means basically how far can the animals could the animals walk in how far could they be, how distant could they be, and the shepherd will be able to watch both sets of animals. Okay, and what is Bakamahi Regel Bahema Ru'ah? So how much is that? Well, the number is Shisha Sarmil, which is interesting, quite a lot. It's 16 mil, which is approximately 16 kilometers. A mil is about a kilometer.
How could you see both?
So if you're standing on top of the hill and looking this direction and looking that direction, it's a very generous measure. Seems quite high to me, but that's what the Mishnah says. I'm not a shepherd, so maybe. Now, if you have the first case over here is pretty obvious. If you have 32 mil between them, then they don't count. Okay, but there's one sheep in the middle, and that joins them all together, right? Because this sheep is closer than 16 mil to this one, and it's closer than 16 mil to the other one. So what happens maybe they all come into the middle, and they join together for Maaseh Behema. Rabbi Meir Omer Hayardein Mafsik Maaseh Behema. He says yes, but if you have the Yarden River separates between them automatically, even if they're grazing on either side and they're just a few meters apart, they are separated. What's his reason is because of in Yoshua it says Yarden Yigbol Oto Lefas Kedma, right? It's a border of the land, and therefore he says that separates between the flocks. However, halacha does not follow Rabbi Meir on this.
The Jordan's not that wide.
No, it's not.
No, it's
they're just a few meters apart.
Right.
It may have been flowing stronger in the earlier days, but
right.
The fact is that in the time of Yeshua, when they crossed the Jordan, Hashem made a nace that the Jordan stopped flowing and the waters went up into the sky and whatever. Okay, but that, like, why would you need a nace to cross a little brook that's sort of trickling, whatever? Okay, whatever. Halakoch or shinitan lo matana. Now, if a person purchased animals or they were given to him as a gift, patur mimaser behema, he does not have to give maser behema on these because a person only has to give maser on the animals that were born into his flock. Okay, the Gemara learns us from the pasuk Bechor banecha titenli kein taseh l'shorcha l'tzonecha. There's a connection between your Bechor children and similarly you should do to the ones in your flock. In other words, just like your sons you don't buy, then the animals that you in your flock that you're going to take maser from are the ones that are born into your flock. Okay. Ha'achim hashutafin. So here you have brothers who have inherited animals that were born into their father's flock before their father passed away. So there's going to be a critical point in the estate where the brothers divide up the inheritance. In the meantime, before they divide up the inheritance, everything belongs to the father. Yeah. So while they are still shitafin, while they're still working the fields, they haven't yet divided up, but they're still working the land and farming the animals just like they were before their father died. Okay. At this point, the property still kind of belongs to the estate. And what this does is it brings an interesting thing. When we talk in Maseches Shekalim, there's the thing called the kalbon. If you recall the kalbon, that was it was an exchange fee, and everyone basically has to pay the kalbon except for somebody who's paying on behalf of somebody else. So then he doesn't have to pay the kalbon. So if the father gives the shekalim on behalf of his children, he does not have to give kalbon on that. So now you have this interesting little situation, which we also identified I think we identified it in Maseches Shekalim, and it was also somewhere in I think Maseches Megillah. Was it Megillah? No, it wasn't. It wasn't Megillah. Doesn't matter. But basically, this it might have been in Chulin. We might have had it in Chulin when we had these cases where the one goes where the cases are sort of mutually exclusive. So if the brothers are chayav in kalbon, what does that mean? If they're chayav in kalbon, it means they've already separated out the estate, which means that each one is taking their own money and putting it in for the shekalim. But what that also means is that the animals that they inherited from their father are animals that were now gifted to them, or that were not born into their personal flocks, and therefore they're patur from Maaseh Behema. Okay, but shechayavin b'Maaseh Behema, once if they are actually chayav in Maaseh Behema together, because these are all animals that were born into their father's flocks and they haven't separated out the estate, but turin min kalbon, because if they're taking the money for the shekalim out of their father's estate, it's keilu their father in Shemayim is still giving the kalbon giving the shekalim on their behalf, and they don't have to pay kalbon. Okay, kanu mitfisas abayis. If they purchased from the rechush from the estate, and according to the parish of Rashi, this is not that they purchased it with money, because anything that was purchased with money is part of a Maaseh Behema, but rather it in other words, they inherited these animals. Okay, they inherited the animals from their father's estate, and the Mishnah is coming to explain the halacha that we learned above. If they receive the animals by Yerusha, they are chayav in Maaseh Behema. But if not, if they have taken them, if they were purchased, or if they've split up the estate, this is patur. So this is how Rashi explains this Mishnah. Rambam explains it differently, but I'm not going to dive too much into that. So what happens if the brothers decide to split the estate, and then they said, you know what? Why don't we just go back in together, and we'll take turns looking after it, and it turns out that they're even partners, and we're going to farm the animals together. it's already done. Chayav and Bekalbon, they still have to give Kalbon because each one is an individual separate partner they're just like any other partners unrelated who are unrelated to each other. And therefore they would still have to pay the Kalbon when giving the Shekalim, but Paturin and Maaseh Behema. And then they no longer have to give Maaseh Behema. They still don't have to give Maaseh Behema on these animals because they were received as part of a divided up Yerusha, not born into their actual flocks.
You have to pay the Kalbon.
And they still have to pay the Kalbon, correct. Okay. Hakol nichnas ledir lihis aser. Every kind of animal is eligible for maser, and that includes bale mumin. An animal, just because an animal has a mum doesn't mean you can't put it into the corral to work out maser. Chutz min kilayim, except what does not get put in is an animal that is a crossbreed, treifa, and an animal that as a treifa, it has a mortal wound. The yotze dofen, even an animal born by cesarean is not considered for maaseh behemoth because it's not considered nolad properly. Mechusar zman, or an animal that's too young, it's like less than 8 days old. Okay, mechusar zman v'yasom, and an orphan. What's this orphan? Ezahu yasom, asks the Mishnah. Kol shem meisa imo, if its mother died, or shenishchata, or its mother was shechted at the time that it was born. In other words, it was never properly nursed. Rabbi Yeshua Amer, afilu nishchata imo b'hashelach kayam ein ze yatom. Even if the mother was shechted, but the shelach means the hide is still around. It's not called an orphan animal. The Gemara explains his reasoning why, because what they would do is if the mother had died at the time of the birth, they would wrap the newborn calf in the hide of its mother in order to warm it, and that's keilu its mother was still alive, and therefore it's not called a yasam. It's not called an orphan, and it can later go into the pen to be maased.
Right. Okay.
And why is a yasam? I'm interested again. Why is the yasam not included? Okay, so Kahati gives the explanation of why all these things are excluded. So first of all, there's a brayso in the Gemara that explains it. The pasuk is shoro kesevo ezki yivaled v'haya shivas yamim tachas imo. So when any of these animals is born, it must at least be 7 days by its mother. So shor or kesev means we're excluding kilayim, no crossbreeds. Shor or kesev, not crossbreed of both. Okay, or a's prat le nidme, and it also excludes one that doesn't look like one of these animals. Ki valed, if it's once it's born, excludes the cesarean. Vaya shivas yamim, and it has to be 7 days, which excludes one that is mechusar zman, that is not yet fulfilled at 7 days. Tachas imo, that's what excludes the orphan. So it's just a gezeres akasu that if it didn't have 7 days with its mother, it doesn't get taken for maaseh behema. Okay.
Okay. Good. Here we go. Above Zion. It is 5-legged, or it has only 3 legs, or its feet are round like that of a donkey, and the shakal and the kosel. What is a shakal? One whose hip is dislocated, and the kosel, an animal's hip is one hip is higher than the other. The bone of the foreleg or the bone of its hind leg was broken, although it is not discernible. The aforementioned blemishes were enumerated by Hela in Ayavna, and the sages concurred with him. It also added another 3, but they said to him, "We have not heard of these." These are: the circle of an eye is round like that of a man, or the mouth resembles that of a pig, or the greater part of its foretongue is gone. However, a substance said these are indeed blemishes. It happened that the lower jaw of an animal protruded beyond its upper jaw, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamil sent to the sages, and they said it is a blemish. And if the kid's ear was doubled, the sages said in this instance that it is one body, it is the blemish. But if not one body, it is not a blemish. Rabbi Kanina ben Gamil says a kid's tail that resembles that of a pig, or a tail that does not have these vertebrae, is a blemish. Rabbi Kanina ben Tigno says if it has wart on the eye or the foreleg, the hind leg
Oh
of
no,
the.
you're already on Mishnah Yud. Sorry, that's so we've done three.
Oh, it did. Okay. Okay. Then, Dalet Gimel. The fetus died in the womb of an animal, and the shepherd stretched out his hand and touched it. Whether it is a non-kosher or a kosher animal, is tahor. Rabbi Yossi Hagili says if it's a non-kosher animal, he is tameh, and if it's a kosher animal, he is tahor. A fetus died within a woman's womb, and the midwife stretched out her hand and touched the midwife and touched it. The midwife is tameh for 7 days, and the woman is tahor until the fetus comes out. An animal is in difficult labor, and the fetus thrust forth its foreleg, and one cut it off, and afterwards he slaughtered its mother, and the flesh is tahor. If he slaughtered its mother and afterwards he cut it off, the flesh is regarded as having touched the nevela. These are the words of the mayor, but the comments say it is regarded as having touched the slaughtered treifa. Just as we find in the case of treifa that is slaughtered offering remnants of tahor, so should to the slaughtering of an animal render the limb tahor. Replied by Meir, not so. If the shkita of a treifa renders the tahor a thing which is its own body, should it also render the limb tahor a thing that is not its own body? From where do we learn that the slaughtering of a treifa renders a tahor? A non-kosher animal is prohibited to be eaten. A treifa is also prohibited to be eaten. Just as a non-kosher animal cannot be rendered tahor by its slaughtering, so should a treifa not be rendered tahor by its slaughtering. Not so. If this can be said of a non-kosher animal which has never had a time of fitness, can the same be said of a treifa which had a time of fitness? Take back what you brought. If it was born treifa, how do we know it? How do we know it? Not so. If this can be said of a non-kosher animal whose entire species has no shkita, can the same be said of a treifa whose species has shkita? An 8-month live birth, its slaughtering does not render tahor because there is no slaughtering in its kind. In the previous Mishnah in Daled, it says if an animal is in difficult labor and the fetus thrusts forward its foreleg and one, let me see if I can get this, one cut it off and off, they saw the mother. For the mother, it's as because she touched it, it's a nevela. They keep talking about the woman here, but it has nothing to do with the man.
Woman. Okay, sorry. The right. So it's in Mishnah Gimel. You're saying.
Daled.
Isha shemeis v'lada b'tzoch me'eha. The one
right.
Which you just read Daled.
I know I read it wrong. All right. In Gimel it says the fetus died in the womb of an animal, and the shepherd stretched out his hand. I thought it was a woman that stretched out.
No, there's a woman at the end of the Mishnah. There's talking.
And if a fetus died within a woman's womb, and the midwife touched her hand out and touched the midwife's stomach for 7 days, and the mother is tahor. But what if it's a man that touches the fetus? He's not tahor.
It's not specifically about man or woman. It's just that your normal case is that the midwife is a woman. Okay, the woman, but the mother herself. Okay, because the midwife is there's naga, it's a chaya. She still she becomes tame because she could walk out the room before the dead baby comes out, and she might think that she is she wait. So hang on, is this a reason? Is it a gezerah? Because the thing with the mother herself is that there's no way she's going to escape the tumah, because she's eventually going to expel the stillbirth and then she's going to become tameh, no question about it. But the midwife is has touched, because she's touched she touched the dead baby inside the mother's womb. Okay, and having touched a dead body, she immediately becomes tameh with tumas shiva.
Right.
But the mother herself has not actually touched the baby until it comes out of her.
Right. But what if it was a man doing all this?
Minatorah. So the Gemara explains that Minatorah, even the midwife is not tameh because it's the tumah is a tumah belua. It's wrapped up inside the mother's womb, but the Chachamim made a gezerah midivrei sofrim that she shouldn't, that shema yotzi ha'ubar esro sholachutz. So because it might come to a situation, it might be confused with the case where the baby has actually put its head out, and then it's definitely matame. Okay, and the midwife would think, oh no, it's not actually, it's still in the womb, so it could be one of those marginal cases, and she thinks that really she's tahor when she's tamei, so they made a gezer on her. But the mother, there's no chashash because ultimately the baby is going to come out and she's definitely going to become tamei.
Right. Okay.
What was your question about the man though?
But if this was a man who was doing all this, if the man thought the fetus, so that would he would
It
be
makes no difference. If you had a midwife man, it would
that's
be
what I
just
think. It would be tummy also.
it would be the same halacha. It's just that your common case is that the midwife is a woman.
Woman, right? All right. Just wondering because it doesn't mention man and woman.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Um,
Mishna, hey.
if one slaughters an animal and finds it in an 8-month fetus, alive or dead, or a dead nine-month fetus, and he tears it open and takes it out, it take out its blood. If he finds a 9-month live fetus, it requires slaughtering and is subject to the prohibition of it and offspring. These are the words of Mavea. But the comments say the slaughtering of its mother renders it permissible. Shuman Cesare says even if it is 8 years old and is plowing in the field, the slaughter of its mother renders it permissible. If he tore her open and he found in her a 9-month live fetus, he requires skita because of the mother was not slaughtered.
I absolutely love that opinion of Rabbi Shimon Shazuri. It's not the halacha, but you, according to his view, if you shechted a pregnant cow,
right?
There was a viable fetus inside that animal is already shechted. So it could be 6 years old and plowing in the field, and you walk over to it and say, "Okay, it's time. Your time's up," and you shoot it in the head, and it's kosher because it was
right.
it was already shechted.
All right. Avos, hey. 10 miracles were performed for our ancestors in the Holy Temple. No woman ever miscarried because of a fragrant smell of the sacrificial meats. The sacrificial meats never became spoiled. A fly was never seen in the temple before the butchering area. A similar discharge was never occurred in the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Rains never extinguished the flow of the fires of the altar. The winds never overcame the column of smoke rising from the top of the altar. No cause for disqualification was ever found in the Omer, the Shtei Alechem, or the Shlechem Panim. And they who assembled in the temple would be standing crowded together, yet prostrated themselves in ample space. No snake or scorpion ever harmed anyone in Yerushalayim, and no man ever said to his friend, "The space is too restricted for me to stay in Yerushalayim." 10 things were created on the first Sabbath at twilight, and these are the opening of the earth's mouth, the mouth of Miriam's well, the mouth of the donkey, the rainbow, the manna, and the staff, the shama worm, the script, the reading, and the tablets. Some say also the destructive spirits, the Moshe's burial place, and the ram of our father Avram, and some say also the first man-made tongues were made with heavenly tongues. 7 things were found in a crude person and 7 in a wise person. A wise person does not speak before someone who is greater than himself in wisdom or number. He does not interrupt the words of his friend. He does not hasten to answer. He asks relative questions and answers appropriately. He discusses first things first and last things last. And about that which he has not heard, he says, "I have not heard." And he concedes the truth, and the opposite is found in a crude person.
Okay.
Gittin Aleph. One who was seized by delirium and said, "Write a get for my wife," and did not say anything. If he said, "Write a get for my wife," and was seized by delirium, he then said, "Do not write it. His latter words are worthless." If one became mute and they said to him, "Shall we write a get for your wife?" and he nodded with his head, and they tested him 3 times. If he said no for a no and yes for a yes, they might write a get and write and give it. If they said to him, "Shall we write a get for your wife?" and he said, "Write," and they told the scribe, and he wrote, or witnesses, and they signed, although they wrote it, signed it, and gave it to him, and he in turn gave it to her. The get is void unless he says to the scribe, "Write," and the witness say, "Sign." If a man said, "This is your get if I die," "This is your get if I die from the illness of mine," or "This is your get after my death," he has not said anything. If he said, "The get should take effect from today if I die," and "From now if I die," it is a get. From today and after my death, it is a get and not a get. And if he dies, she becomes Kalisa, but not evil. If he said, "This is yours from today, if I die from this illness of mine," and then he rose and went to the marketplace and became ill and died, we assess him. If he died from his first illness, it is a get. If not, it is not a get.
Okay.
Shabbos. I was bet. There are knots for which we're not liable to. I'm sorry. There are knots for which we're not liable, as we are for the camel driver's knot and the sailor's knot. A woman may tie the opening of her chemise strings of strings of a hairnet or the girdle straps of a shoe or sandal, leather canteens of wine or oil, or a pot of meat. Elias ben Yaakov says we may tie a rope in front of an animal in order that it not go out. We may tie a pail with a belt, but not with a rope. Yehuda permits this. If Yehuda stated a general rule, any knot which is not on Sabbath for the night after the Sabbath. So that's why I skipped the page. Come on. Rabbi Yehuda stated a general rule: any knot which is not permanent, we're not liable for. So that would be the reason, I guess, why you could make a double knot on Shabbos, because you're not going to hold that double knot over the 24-hour period.
In your shoelaces.
Shoelaces, right?
Yeah.
You're going to untie it before, right? We may fold garments even 4 or 5 times. We may make the beds on the night of the Sabbath for the Sabbath, but we were not on the Sabbath the night after the Sabbath. But Ishmael says we may fold garments and make beds on Yom Kippur for the Sabbath, and fats of the Sabbath sacrifices may be offered on Yom Kippur. And Mekiva says neither those or the Sabbath may be offered on Yom Kippur, nor those of Yom Kippur may be offered on Sabbath. And in all books of Holy Scripture may be saved from the fire, whether we read from them or whether we do not read from them. Even though they are written in any foreign language, they warrant being hidden away. Now, why do we not read from them? Because the neglect of the lecture hall. We may save the case of the scroll with the scroll and the case of the tefillin with the tefillin, even though there is money in them, to where we may take them to safety, to a blind alley, and Ben Masera says even to an open one. Okay, and last. Okay, Vav. An uncertainty of Tuma in a private domain is deemed Tamei until he says, I did not touch the Tamei object. An uncertainty of Tuma in a public domain is deemed Tahor until he says, I touched the Tamei object. Which is a public domain, the paths of Beis Gilgal and other paths similar to them are private domain in regard to the laws of Sabbath, but a public domain in regard to the laws of Tuma. Says with Eliezer, the path of Beis Gilgal were not mentioned in the academy other than to teach that they are the private domain for the Sabbath laws and for that for the Tuma laws. The paths that open into pits, ditches, vaults, and wine vats are a private domain for the laws of the Sabbath and a public domain for the laws of Tuma. An area of open fields during the summer season is a private domain with regard to the laws of Sabbath and a public domain in regard to the laws of Tuma, whereas during the rainy season it is a private domain with regard to both this and that. And the basilica is a private domain for the Sabbath, but a public domain for Tuma. Rabbi Yehuda says if he stands at the entrance and sees those who enter and those who leave at the other entrance, it is a private domain for this and for that. But if not, it is a private domain for the Sabbath and a public domain for Tuma. Okay.
Hey.
Good.
We're done.
Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow. Okay, yes, thanks.
Have a great day. Bye.